still watching Life Stories. Thank you for being a part of the show. We continue with the stories about the Northern Uganda War that involved the Lord's Resistance Army and the Uganda People's Defense Forces. It is unbelievable that while in other parts of the country, people enjoyed peace, in the north, people were being tortured, murdered, homes were being burnt, people were being massacred. And this was happening in the same country. These people faced a lot of torture for a long time, over 20 years. Unbelievable, but true. Meeting the victims of the war in Northern Uganda one-on-one and visiting different places in Northern Uganda, I couldn't help but ask myself a few questions. Did we as a people understand the magnitude of the atrocity that took place in Northern Uganda? Was that war really necessary? And for that matter, is any war anywhere in the world necessary? But perhaps the most important question is, do we have any lessons we have learned from that experience? And if any, what are they? Many questions seeking answers. But this is what a few people had to say.
The Northern War was tragic. I personally feel it. Of course, the Northern people, who was at the center of the theater of war and murder, feel it much more deeply. Like the Chinese say, that those who feel it know it better, and those who know it feel it more. War should be avoided by all means. Though, of course, different theorists will tell you that there is what they call just war, like the wars of liberation, and unjust war. Myself and many others who think right feel that Kony was fighting an unjust war.
From an early age, we always had this assumption. To us, it was almost like a myth, like there's always war in Northern Uganda, but nobody wanted to talk about it, and teachers never expounded on it, so we kind of just left it at that. So when I came back from Chicago 2005, when I started doing music, a friend of mine told me to sing about the Gulu Walk. And I said, why are 41 cities around the world walking for Northern Uganda, for Gulu? What's in Gulu? She's like, you mean you don't know about the war? And I'm like, no. So I go on the internet, and I was absolutely shocked to find people's lips being chopped off, heads being boiled, you know, limbs being cut off. I was just completely, absolutely shocked. And I couldn't believe that so many people didn't know about that. I mean, I asked around and people were like, yeah. I'm like, but do you know how serious it is?
He had no clear goal. He had no clear target. It was just an indiscriminate terrorist activity. Because if you are fighting a government based in Kampala, then you don't attack helpless wananchi, helpless civilians. Some of them your relatives. At least you would have the courtesy of feeding for your own beloved. So it was like a war being orchestrated by demon-possessed monsters. So really, and you can see how peace is sweet. When you see the recovery in the area, if you can see the production that people had never thought of, that it can take part, that can now go on in Northern Uganda. People going to Western Uganda to pick banana suckers, to make use of their arable, fertile land, which all along they had been denied of. These are really memories that will make everybody to regret that 19 or 20-year insurgency.
I never, ever think that violence is the solution to anything. I mean, what do you achieve through war? So many people dead, so many people traumatized. You end up building things, spend so many years building and building. Like, look how beautiful Uganda is. After so many years, when I was abroad and came back and found, you know, supermarkets, all these buildings, and then imagine a war, you tear it down. I mean, a war is never the solution. That is like cutting your own foot off. So I would never recommend a war or violence to any problem.
We should treasure peace and work for peace, and avoid war where we can avoid war.
Hearing the stories from the victims who were trying to recover those wasted years, talking to them one-on-one was no small feat. it drains you emotionally and psychologically. I kept thinking about the things that they told me. It was really, really, really sad. It's one thing to know that war happened in one part of the country. It's another thing altogether to meet people that were there, that faced these very, very traumatic things.
Hi, my name is Peter Kitrim, and what I think about wars is that they're not necessary because thousands of people are killed, and like if you attack, they can attack back and you end up being killed yourself. For example, like the Northern Uganda War, where thousands of people were killed, including child soldiers and Kony's war.
We have a lost generation in Northern Uganda as a result of this war. In fact, if you look at some of the studies that have been made, 56% of the population in Northern Uganda has been affected by AIDS, unlike the prevalence in other regions of Uganda. You have a lot of children, young girls who are mothers. You have a lot of orphans. Even that period, about 15 years that we had the people in the north in IDPs, in internally displaced camps, and were not involved in any economic activity and so on. So there is a lot of deepening poverty. There is a sharp divide between the north and the south. I am of course happy that the war has come to an end when this government is still in power, so that then it is able to attend to some of those effects of the war. And because if the government was to change and another government came in and it has to deal with that lost generation, for those of us who are in our early 30s, we have our brothers who have been in the war there for that period of time, didn't go to school, and they look at those in the south as those who did not understand their situation. So that polarization, dividing the country into two, the haves and the have-nots, was going to have a catastrophic effect on the country, even if it's not now, but in years to come. But I see some efforts now at trying to address questions of poverty and the psychological effect that the war had on the people. But in general, if there is always a chance for peace, we should always explore that.
Olutalo eggulu naluwulirako naye terwansanyusa kubanga ekintu ekyali kibalwanya kyatulema okutegeera. Twawuliranga nti Kony yayingizanga abaana abato mu buyeekera kakkananga bagenda bafiira obwereere nga tebamanyi. Ekirala kati awo bye twawuliranga nti babasalako amatu, bakwata abakazi, ebintu ebyali bitasaana kubanga bitulugunyizibwa ku muntu wa bulijjo ng'ekyo.
Watching the affected children tell their stories should have each of us vow never to allow war to stain our nation again. The price is too high. We're going to go into a short break, and when we return, we continue with the stories of the war in Northern Uganda. Life Stories will be right back.